What we're doing today is having a dialogue, which for anybody watching is distinct from a conversation in that both participants are meant to be listening carefully, thinking about what the other person is saying, and being open to having their mind changed. Not that you would have your mind change the moment of the dialogue, but it might change in the weeks or months afterwards, just from truly being open to it, which is a difficult thing to do. And the situation today is that Destiny and I don't know each other at all. We have only spoken once in a 10-minute kind of pre-screen call just to make sure we're both real people. And we're going to talk today about confidence. What does real confidence look like? How is it developed? And how can we think about it in our lives? So, Destiny, would you like to start with any thoughts you have on it, or do you want me to start?
Um, Whichever really works. If you have some thoughts running in your head, feel free to let them out.
I do have some thoughts actually. So, when I think of confidence, there's the notion of what you hear in self-help books and stuff like that, where, fake it till you make it. And there's things that you can do in your mind. But I think that confidence begins way, way back in your life when you're just a little kid. Your parents are kind of paying the right amount of attention to you and you feel valuable in their eyes. I think that that sows the seeds for confidence. And even if things are difficult for you later on, you can hold on to that. I think it builds the initial self-esteem. And it's not just me, this is an established psychological concept. So when I think about how confidence has built in my own life, so much of it has been like in my own therapy, going back and trying to um, visit situations with my parents where I could, consider whether I was valued and getting the right attention and that sort of thing. So that has helped to build my confidence a lot, is thinking back to those original situations and being a kid. So that's one way that I start thinking about confidence, is like you either have it or you don't by the time you're an adult. And then there's work you can do. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Maybe a little like biased because I am studying psych and specifically with kids too. So I do see a lot of it just in my studies and everything. And I agree. I think it has a lot to do with how you're developing from literally as early as your infanthood and the amount of attention that your caregivers give you and how much validation you get as a kid to, explore your world, explore yourself, and just be okay with who you are and what you want to learn as a kid. And having that type of validation so young in your life can really be the tipping point for how you feel about yourself and other people as well, and your interactions with other people as you grow up and become a young adult and become a full-fledged adult later on. And like you said, if that seed isn't planted very early on, you kind of don't have it as you grow up, and it can become very difficult to plant later on and have to do a lot of work as an adult and a young adult, either through therapy or just like self-reflection and self um I say healing, to find that later on in your life. So it's, yeah, it definitely does start as early as, I would say, a few months old.
Hmm. Right. So this gets me thinking about kind of a problem with the discussion of confidence and with trying to help people with it. Whether it's you're just trying to help out a friend or something like that, is people will often say, well, you just have to be true to who you are, and if you're good with who you are, then other people will be, and you're going to be good. But that is sometimes an enormously difficult thing that is not addressed properly in a quick message on social media, or even if you're just getting together with a friend to say that. I feel like there's more value in the fact that your friend is saying that to you, which is a reflection of you in their eyes, that I think you're valuable. I think that's where the value is. It's not in the message itself, because I think that message is too hard to take in. I mean, the amount of work that needs to be done to go back and think about whether you really think you are valuable is too great. I mean, that's a long time of work. So I consider it quite a big problem. I don't know if you agree with that or if that's been your experience, but I'm kind of like, how do you help people to develop confidence when there's an enormous task underneath the ask that no one person can really do for somebody?
Yeah, it's a very deep process, because it can open a lot of doors to a lot of, different, potentially different traumas, potentially just like negative experience and negative um, emotions someone has about themselves. And that can, like you said, be a lot of work to untangle and a lot of just a very deep process. And you, can maybe as a friend point someone in the right direction towards untangling that, but you can't really do it for them. And it's going to take a lot of work for that person to do. Um, but I do think there is a step in that right direction when you have a friend or a loved one or anyone who, is of value to you in your life tell you, hey, I know you may not yet see this about yourself, but I do love you and you are very valuable, and you deserve to see yourself in that light as much as I see you in that light. And having, those voices in your life tell you that, and not even necessarily tell you to, but also show you.
Hmm.
Because someone can say that, and then when it's time to put action to those feelings, it's not as it's not reflected as strongly. And so it's hard to believe someone who's like, yeah, I value you, but then when it's time to show you and come, you know, come to the table when you need it, it's not the same sentiment. So I think it's also important to show the people that you care about that you care, and that they do hold the same value in your life that you're saying they do. And that'll really be a way for that person who may not be completely confident in themselves to see that other people see them in that way, and they can begin to start to unpack those things that they have to do for themselves.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I would add one clarification, which is that it could be tempting in quote unquote being there for somebody to try to solve their problem, and like that is not at all what they need.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a huge thing too. Like, you can't solve, I always say to people, like, you can't help someone who doesn't want to be helped.
Mhm.
Like I said, you can point them in the direction, you can tell them, but if they don't want to do that process for themselves, you can't make them. Um, and so you can't try to be the person to fix everybody, to fix your friends, they have to do it on their own. And that's can be a hard process for someone too who's like very empathetic, who just likes to be a good friend, um, because you want to help, but there's a difference between helping and trying to fix. Um, and yeah, so you just gotta remember, I think, as being a supportive friend, to be supportive but not be the fixer upper in a sense, or try to fix the person.
Mm.
Because that can, I would say, I wouldn't say necessarily damaging, but that's just not gonna really resolve the issue as much as you think it might.
Yeah, I find that when I try to do that, and I sort of have what I think is a fairly common like male characteristic where I do try to fix things, and my wife reminds me of this all the time. Um, I find that like there's a lot of good intentions behind it, but ultimately what she wants and what I want the same thing often is just someone to be there and to listen. And then not just that, but that consistently over time.
Mhm.
I think if somebody has very low confidence or low self-esteem, it takes probably years of knowing that someone or a group of people, a number of individuals are willing to be there for them. Um, just consistently. And that doesn't mean always, because one of the fascinating things that I've had to learn about building confidence in my life is that there's the confidence that you needed to get just from knowing that your mom and your dad were there for you and showed. I think that was a great point that you raised before, not just told, but showed that they valued you. And you can never get that again. Something is kind of lost forever, in my opinion, if you don't get that. But you can build up and get to a very good place where you absolutely do have confidence, even if there's still an early injury that remains. But it takes a long time to do that. Um, a relationship with a friend, a therapist, just the consistency of knowing someone is there, I think can be a major help. But it can also be very difficult because people go through all kinds of things that others can't really help them that much with. There's a lot of, I think, personal responsibility ultimately, and like you have to take care of this yourself, and
Mhm.
that can feel not good for a lot of people that are like, shoot, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I mean, it runs the you have to just, like, run the risk of being if seeing these people in your life and that value you, and I would say kind of using that as a tool to, like, help you get to a better place in your own confidence and self-love, but then you also have to be careful to not use those people in your life as a crutch and not, then ask too much of them to try to bury your own self-work that you have to do. Because like you said, it has to be consistent support and love and value from these people, but they're not going to always be able to do everything and be there all the time. People have their own lives that they have to attend to. They have their own emotions and their own things going on that they can't always be the support for you, and that is completely fair, because we're all human. We all have other priorities sometimes, and you have to be everyone has to learn, in my opinion, to be their own priority sometimes. And especially in building up your own confidence and self-love, you have to then see, like, hey, these other people have been able to put me as a priority. I have to now learn to put myself first. And when they can't understand that it's not about me, and it's not a reflection of my own worth, it's just I can't always be the priority. So let me then start the process so I can do that for myself and I can be my own value.
Hmm. Right. You can value yourself.
Exactly.
Um, so I like what you have to say, and it sounds like we feel similarly. I'm kind of curious about your own process, if you would be comfortable sharing like how you've built
Oh yeah.
confidence yourself. Are you confident, and have you always been? If so,
Definitely not always have. I have definitely not always been as confident as I would say I am now in my life. I think just, going through I think high school was the most like tumultuous time. As a kid, I I I did have parents that, valued me and pushed me to try things, explore, just really be my best self. And as a kid, and I would say still to this day, but it's gotten better. I put a lot of value based on like my academic ability, and I was always from like 2 years old on like the little baby genius, and so I was getting straight A's, and in elementary school there were fours on the report card, and just always like the top of my class, and I became that person. And my parents were like very proud of me because of that. And as I think any parent would be, their kid is doing great.
hmm
um but then the older I got and the more like that became like my thing, it kind of became my identity. So then I developed a lot of, I guess, anxiety around disappointment. And if I was to ever fail or get any less than an A, or maybe a B, I had some wiggle room, I wouldn't be as valued as I was, with my peers, with my family, with my parents, because that was always the main validation that I got. And so that didn't really. So that was just like something some pressure I always put on myself up until I would say college. And college was the first time that I started failing some things, and I was like, oh my God, what is happening? I've got D's on my like on my transcript. I was doing pre-med when I really shouldn't have been.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a huge like punch in the face, honestly. And I had to figure out like what do I want and how am I going to value myself outside of how I can perform academically. And that was a big conversation with my parents that I had, that I was like, hey, I need to switch my major to something that you're not necessarily going to be happy with, but I need to be like value, and I need you to see that I'm making this switch because I'm unhappy and I'm putting too much to perform to other people's expectations. I need to do what's good for me and what makes me feel good about myself. And so I did it, and it was probably the best decision I had. And I switched into psych, and it's just a major that really makes me feel whole. It makes me, the work I do in psych and to develop my career is something that, one, I am good at, which is a good thing, and then two, I just really care about, and I see myself in my work, and I see what I can do to other people. So that really recentered how I see my performance value. And that was a huge shift in like my confidence, where I place my confidence in a sense. So that
Hmm.
was one aspect of it. And I, before I dive into like the other aspects, I do think that self-love and confidence can come in the what's the word I'm blanking on. And the journey someone can go through with that will be different for everyone. Because while someone might be confident in their appearance, they can be very unconfident in their, I don't know, emotional abilities or their academic abilities. There's very different places someone can be.
Hmm.
And I would say I I had, different points of my journey where I was confident in one thing and then other things not so much. And so like going back to high school, I was the only girl on the wrestling team. And that was a dope experience. And I would do it again. I miss it so much. And that became like, wow, she's the only girl on the wrestling team. She's really representing it out here. I couldn't do it, but shout out to her. And that was, I love the sport, but also a big part of wrestling is you have to make weight. And for guys, it is much easier to cut down some pounds if you have to than women. And I've always just been like a broader, thicker woman my entire life. And that was my weight. The feelings I had about my own weight, fluctuated from middle school to high school and stuff. I had a lot of outside voices with my family being like, hey, don't get too big because that's not going to look good. So like I always had those voices, like that body image insecurity in my head, but it didn't really come out as strongly until high school. And then being on the wrestling team and having weight be such a big part of the sport, my coaches thankfully, didn't really put that pressure on me, but it was still a part of the sport nonetheless. You couldn't avoid it. And so the more I was into it, the more like it just became so present in my life, and in a negative way. And I did a lot of, I would say I did a lot of things to my body that I probably shouldn't have. Trying to just be one the athlete that I wanted to be, and then two also like be attractive in high school. Like I went to I went to an all white high school, private high school, and being the minority, one is like not the best experience, and then two, like I just didn't really look like the smaller white girls that got all of the attention and had all the resources to look good, honestly. And I now, I don't say like you should ever put your value on how the attention you get from other people, whether like romantic or sexual attention. But going through that point in my life, like it was definitely something that I struggled with, and I wasn't getting romantic or sexual attention in high school. I was in a sport that was always like, you got to make this image, like make this cut, and so my body image was a mess in high school. And
Mhm.
then it wasn't until again college where I really was like, I am beautiful. I love the way I look, and maybe part of it was because for the first time I was actually getting a little bit more attention dating, but it was more because I would say it was the attention actually came from not the way I looked, because I didn't look that much different from high school, but not from the attention that I was getting romantically and sexually, but the way that I presented myself and the way I just like the way was getting that attention because what how do I explain this? I was getting that attention because of just the way I just owned it in a sense. I was just like, this is me, take it or leave it. And I really just wanted to not not like myself anymore.
Hmm.
And because it's exhausting. And
So
so that happened.
there's so many interesting things you just said. I'm like, okay, where do I start?
Yeah, it was
So
a lot.
no, I mean, I'm very intrigued by the idea that you could finally feel that you were beautiful after college or in college. I mean, how does something like that just happen when you had so much insecurity in high school? Like so many, I mean, all of us do. I think probably particularly women with image related things. I've heard that from almost all of my women friends. So how does that just change? I mean, you alluded to it by saying that you were getting attention.
Mhm.
Is that it, or did something change mentally?
No, I think it's a mix of both. Even if I didn't get the attention, I still think the process would have happened because it was coming from me. I was, like I said, in high school, I was, just not treating my body right and not both mentally and physically. And I just, at one day, just like was like, what am I doing to myself? Like, I'm unhappy. I don't like the way I look, but I don't, but like, why? It's like,
Mhm.
and I was like, okay, what can I change? Yeah, I can change myself physically, which, may help, but that's not the problem. The problem is what am I valuing, and like, what do I want people to see me as, right? Is it being a little more skinny so I'm a little more attractive? Is that what it is? Or is it really just I'm putting, this pressure on myself to look a certain way, to fit a certain mold that's not me.
Mm.
And so when I, sat down and had that like inner conversation with myself, I was like, no, like I want to be the one who is just happy and bright and a good person to, yes, other people around me, but mainly first to myself. And I just, started to push myself to do that. When I caught myself being negative to myself, like in the mirror, I would flip the switch kind of and be like, no, nah, you're kind of like, you actually are, like, you look so good. Like, wow, like you're owning it. Like, wow, this dress or this shirt, like fire.
Okay, so
um,
that's amazing. If you don't mind me kind of interrupting, because I want to bring up
no,
this
definitely.
point. I think what you said, one thing you said really rings true to me, which is that it's not necessarily like what you look like, whether it's like a little bit this, a little bit that. It's the fact you said that you owned it, but it's that you believed it and that you were comfortable with yourself, which is not an easy thing to do, as we kind of alluded to earlier. But I think understanding like the truth of who you are and trying your best to just be like, this is who I am, like it or not, self, like really talking to yourself more than anything, and also, like it or not, world. I know that for me, that has been tremendously valuable, because unlike you, it took me until I was in my early 30s to start to get to know myself. I mostly, was very academically driven, similar to you, and but also success driven in terms of making a lot of money and um, being a big deal according to like my Long Island, New York roots, where the success is a very big thing amongst Jews on Long Island, where I grew up, and it basically had me thinking about that all the time. And it sounds like teenage and childhood you can relate to that. I mean,
Yeah,
that's what I
I
was.
could relate.
Yes. So, but credit to you, because I think certainly earlier on you realized that. But for me, when I finally started to be like, wait, what do I like? What do I look for in life? What makes me happy? I feel like I needed to establish myself and get a little bit of material success first, so I could see that it did nothing positive for my confidence. Like, other people were reflecting positive things on me, but deep down, I didn't think much of myself. I still had the same insecurities, but when I finally, and it's not just like, oh, I believed that I was worth something. Like, that's too big of a leap. It has to start with, well, who am I? What's true about me? What do I like? Um, what are the ideas I care about in life? What does it look like to be friends with me? And what kind of friendships do I want? Knowing myself is where it started. Confidence for me. So I'm not sure if that's what you're saying. I ran with that, but
Yeah, no, that's definitely it. And I think, like I said a little bit earlier, is that that process is going to look different for everyone, right? So for someone who the process is going to look very different for everyone, but it all is going to come down to like those same sentiments that you just talked about. Just what do I like about myself, and what do I like that I present to the world, right? And for someone, dealing with like body dysmorphia, for example, right? It could be just like, oh, there's actually this one part of the way I look that I absolutely love. And let me start from there, right? As simple as, like I said, like talking to yourself a little bit every day in the mirror and being like, oh, wow, I really do like the way I smile. Or,
hmm,
wow, like I'm strong. Or, and just seeing what your body can do for you outside of the way it looks, right? Your body's strong, your body's healthy, your body's supporting you, your body's alive. Like that's,
hmm,
these small things can really start to build up, right? And then on the another side, like you said, Barry, and we both can empathize with this, is just like the success drivenness. People, everyone outside is like, yeah, you're doing so good, like you're doing amazing, but you don't, you're not happy with everything you're doing, right? But making that switch again of like, wow, what am I bringing to the table for me? Like, what do I like about what I'm doing? And if I don't, is it like, it is okay to say no and to make switches in your life to change it up for yourself, to get to a place where you are happy with what you're doing, you are happy with who you are and what you're bringing to the table for yourself, for the world.
hmm.
um and being being the true self of who you want to be. It's very psych. Your true self, your ideal self, your
Mhm.
inner
Yeah.
self. But yeah, really matching who you present to be to who you actually feel and want to be.
Wow.
And I think, real confidence and real fully, embodying confidence. And yes, it'll always waver some days, and that's normal. I think that's good. But really being able to say, like, I love myself, I value myself, I am confident as a whole, is when you can match who you want to be in this world and who your ideal self as much as possible to who you really are. Like, who are you at your worst, at your best? Just your authentic, true self, and be happy with that.
Yes. So know yourself first and love yourself after. That's the order.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that seems really profound. And I am struck by how terrifying it must have been for you to um, drop that academic success connection that you had going on with your parents and not
Whew.
be pre-med. No longer are you going to be the successful doctor that everyone's proud of in your family. I'm just guessing that that was a big feeling that you held on to. And now you're going to go into, I mean, psychology sounds like a great thing to me, but perhaps, well, perhaps you felt to your family, um, it would represent a kind of failure. You're going off the track. And you got poor grades in pre-med. Like,
Oh, that was a mess.
yeah, that must have felt so bad. So it sounds like that was part of the beginning of getting to know yourself, is actually being like, wait, this is not me. And the grades are kind of telling me that, and I'm going to listen to it.
Yeah, I was, yeah, and one thing I had to sit back when I was failing was really be like, okay, but why am I failing? Because it's not that I am a, like, I don't know, not for other people. Don't put other people in this, but like for myself, it was like, it's not that I'm a bad student, right? Because all my life I've been very academically sound. This is my thing. Like, and so what about it before? Before was happening that I was able to, be successful even when things were difficult, right?
Mhm.
Math has been a difficult subject for me all the time, but I was able to do science and math before and be successful in it. What is happening now that the puzzle piece isn't fitting? And it is really not fitting. I'm really trying to jam it in there and it's not
Mhm.
fitting.
Mhm.
And I had to really sit down and be like, it's not necessarily me. Well, I was like, it's not me that's the problem. It's not like my academic ability that's the problem. It's I'm trying to again and force a piece of me into a puzzle that's not my puzzle.
Mm.
Like I trying to fit this mold and this idea of like what success looks like and success for me will look like. That's not it. This is not my story. This is not my journey. I need to do something else.
Hmm.
And it's funny because like psych was always like calling me a little bit, but I was like, now I need to, I said I was going to be a doctor. This is what I'm going to do.
Mhm.
And when I had that conversation with my parents, it was a tough conversation. Lots of tears, lots of questions that I didn't have answers to yet.
Mhm.
And that was really hard for my parents to deal with and hard for me to deal with. It's like, I don't have the answers to these questions yet. Like, I don't know necessarily where I'm going to take it, but I need to make the switch and take it somewhere else than where I'm going because where I'm going is not working.
Hmm.
And you can't, if it's not working, don't make it work. Well, don't for don't force something that is so obviously not working for you to work for you just because you think it you think it might or
Wow.
someone else might think it might. And it was that whole conversation and that process was really just me sitting down with my parents and being like, hey, I can't do this. And I'm sorry if it's, you're just saying like, I need to try harder. I need to manage my time better. Like, please realize like the problem isn't that. It's that this is not me. This is not true to who I am. And trust me when I say like, I will be successful when I do something that's actually me.
Mm.
And they were like, okay, prove it. And I proved it. And because I was able to finally listen to myself and do what the inner me was telling me I needed to do. And that's where that shift came in.
Yes,
Um,
definitely. Oh, I'm sorry. Do you want to
oh
finish?
yeah, and I was just like to say like also that was also a part of the process for the other like insecurities that I had too, like other social anxieties that I was dealing with at that time, and again like my body image challenges was really again pushing against those voices that were whether it was like with my parents or just like myself and like I guess society a little bit, just really pushing back and being like, all right, this needs to stop, and because it's hurting me, and let me make those changes so that I'm not in a place with people or influence that are bringing me down, and let me start challenging it so I can bring myself up. Right. And I
Yeah.
say that like, that sounds very like general, but it was like with my mom, I was like, okay, some of these little comments about let's go on a diet, let's lose weight, let's do this, do that. I was like, stop. Like, I want to just be and exist. And like, I'm happy with how I look, like, take it or leave it. And was like, it was hard for me to do that at first, being so young. And then, but once I did that, it was like, okay. I was like, thankfully, very, like, and it was, well, actually wasn't as just like simple as okay. But once I think she started to see, like, hey, this isn't like something I want to hear, and I'm just going to be good on my own terms, she started coming along with me. But if I never took that step for myself, that probably wouldn't have happened.
So I really want to emphasize something that I'm hearing, which is you're not quite making it sound easy. You've emphasized that it wasn't easy, but the moment that conversation that you needed to have, you were mentioning your mom specifically. I don't know if your dad was part of it, but um, it wasn't just like, yeah, this is not working for me. It was tears, like you said. And it was a difficult conversation. And so I just want to emphasize that point that there's two things happening. First is there was some degree of going against the grain that was necessary for you to start getting to know yourself. There's some degree of saying there's a powerful force of authority, my parents, that are telling me that this is the right way to go pre-med. And I've told myself and added fuel to the fire with this idea that this is the way to go. And I'm going to go against it, which takes quite a bit of bravery to do. Not everybody instantaneously has that bravery. I would say some people probably go their whole lives and don't have that moment, which hopefully, listening to things like this helps people to, get that little push to try to rebel a little bit more towards the things that you really are. But that was very difficult, what you did, and I can't imagine how. I mean, I can sort of imagine how difficult it was because I had a very similar situation where I was meant to be a star lawyer and be the good Jewish kid that gets good grades, goes to an Ivy League school, becomes a lawyer, and I didn't get into a good law school. And that was my first. I mean, that was my moment. Like you're getting poor grades in your pre-med classes. It was like something's telling me that law isn't there, but I didn't know it. I was just like, shoot, I didn't do a good job. I should have studied more, something like that. And then I finally had to, I mean, feel the tremendous failure of having to tell my parents, guess what? I'm going to drop out of law school. And I wouldn't be able to do justice to how seismic that moment was for me. I mean, it really was the moment of change. I think you took it in a better direction than me in terms of ultimately feeling confidence and that you started being yourself. I just went into a different direction of not being myself and trying to be successful in a way I could do more easily. But my main point is that a lot of bravery is needed and some degree of rebellion is often necessary. That's the thread that I'm learning as I'm talking to you in order to start to figure out who you are, especially as a young person, growing up in late teenage years in your 20s, which is when a lot of that development occurs, when you can finally know who you are a little bit more. So I don't know if you've any thoughts about that. If not, I have another question I wanted to ask.
Yeah, I think you summed it up really well, actually, I would say. And along my own process, I had people, I had friends who were like very supportive with me in high school too, and were kind of surprised actually that I was dealing with all these like insecurities, and because I on the outside seemed very sound in myself and confident and always out there, because I was always supporting my other friends and stuff. So it never occurred to them that I was also not as okay with myself as I presented to be. um and I think part of that, which might bring up another part of the conversation, is I never knew that it was okay to ask for help. I was always raised to be also like very independent, very just I'm gonna deal with it myself, and because I can do it good by myself, you know. And if I can do it well on my own without asking for help, that's even better. Um, and that was, yes, a thing, like academically and successful and like success wise, but also like very much about the ways I dealt with my own emotions and my own just like problems. I was like, if I have a problem, I'm gonna deal with myself. If I am sad or angry, I don't need to let anyone know about it. Like I can get over it myself and
Mm.
get back to being, you know, the happy go lucky one, so other people don't have to deal with it. And so because of that, people, you know, were always like supportive and like, you know, giving me praises about things, but I never really, no one really like was able to help me with the process that I needed to actually go through because I didn't let anyone into it, and I wasn't able to start that, you know, unpacking and detangling of all these insecurities and stuff because until I was actually able to open up to it and open it up to myself, but also open it up to other people in my life and be like, you might say like this is how you feel about me, but also this is how I feel about myself. So how now you know, and because you know, I know. Now I think I can begin to like figure it out. And that is a terrifying experience. That was not easy. That took, I think, maybe 3 years of me like dealing with my own negative struggles in my head to then let people in. And that was just on one part. I didn't ask for help until for other things and like start talking to like opening maybe to the idea of therapy, for example, because I had developed a lot of like social anxiety in college, and I didn't open myself to the thought of therapy for until like last year.
Mhm.
And academically, I didn't ask for help in my entire first year of college, and maybe until maybe my late sophomore year of college was when I was like, again, I can't do it on my own, and obviously it's not going well. Let me talk to my advisors who are literally, it's their job
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
help you. But I was like, no, I don't need it.
Hmm.
And not until literally second semester of sophomore year of college, I was like, let me ask somebody for help because obviously this is not working on my own. It's getting really bad. I can't do it.
Wow.
And so that was a huge, like you said, it is a brave, like something that is very brave to do and not easy at all for anybody to who's, especially people who are not used to asking for help and being the very independent folks, and you know, taking all of their stuff on themselves to actually be like, no, you can't do it on your own. Ask for help. Help is a good thing. It's okay to not always be okay all the time.
Right. It's not just okay, it's human. And
Yeah.
one thing that one thing that's occurring to me as you're talking, because I'm further away from high school now than you are. I'm in my late 30s, and I I don't even know how possible it is to just be your full confident self in high school because of the environment. It's also, I don't know, biologically just a time when people are figuring out their identity and trying on new identities, and it can be very confusing to just be like, I'm not okay, I'm insecure, I'm anxious, I've got all these things going on. And the weird thing is everybody is involved in the charade, and everybody feels that way. I mean, that we all know from social media and stuff like that, but there's people
Excuse
that
me.
act like they are fine all the time, and you were doing that a lot. I certainly did that in high school. But when you get to the point when you can admit to not just yourself but others, and for different people that order changes. Sometimes you start by saying it to someone else, and then you can start to know it yourself, and other times it's like, oh my god, this is true, and you might figure it out when you're talking to somebody you trust, and then eventually have the courage to tell others, hey, guess what, I deal with anxiety, or I get depressed sometimes, or whatever. But Doing that is actually a part of building confidence, even though it sounds like an unconfident thing to do. That's kind of interesting to me.
Yeah. It's a very vulnerable place you have to put yourself into. And it's part of it is accepting. I think it's funny because, like you said, it's a very unconfident thing to do. It's you have to accept, like, hey, I'm not confident. I'm very insecure. I'm not happy, but I don't want to be like this, right? This is not the ideal. This is not the goal at all. And so it is tough to be that vulnerable with yourself. And then, especially if you can be vulnerable with, like that with yourself, then be vulnerable like that with other people. And it is very hard to not put on the facade or the false identity of being confident.
Hmm.
But it's very human. And like you said, especially at a very vulnerable and tumultuous time like high school or early college, just like these adolescent parts of your life, to everyone's literally in the same boat as you.
Yeah.
Not every, yeah. And it's like, it's different for everyone. Obviously, everyone is dealing with all these things in different degrees, but for the most part, people can relate. And I believe, like, once I was, and other people, other friends too, who I've talked to along the way, were able to put themselves in that vulnerable position, was and that very unconfident position, was when the switch started. And the journey is a long journey and different for different timelines for different people. But once that first step was taken and that vulnerability door was opened, was the first step to getting confident. You have
Hmm.
to start, I think, accepting how unconfident you are for whatever reasons, to then change and get to the very ideal confidence that you want.
Wow. So that's
And
not
you're,
intuitive,
yeah,
but it's so true.
yeah, exactly. And it is also, it's a lie to say once you get there, you're going to be there forever, right?
Mhm.
No, like, I would say, like, now I am much more confident than I was at 16 years old. And I would say, like, now, like, I am at, like, the highest self-love I've been. But that doesn't mean, like, every day, like, I am like that. There are some days and some interactions that really, like, make me question um who I am or what I like about myself. But then the next day, or even maybe a few hours later, or just later on, whenever the time may be, like, I'm like, I return back to, like, okay, these are still the things I like about myself.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, if I am questioning something about myself, why? Is it because this is an actual piece of me that may not be the best and I actually want to change it? Or if it's just those, inklings of insecurity creeping back in, let's let them creep back out.
Mhm. Mhm.
So it's always going to be a little bit of a roller coaster, but um, the dips, I think, are just very human and a part of just going through everyday life. But you want to get to a place where you can start at the top and wake up and just be happy with who you are and all you are. And then the dips won't feel as crazy and
Yeah.
on that, like, roller coaster.
Yeah. I think you're going to find that, well, I believe, without knowing you very well, that your journey will be similar to mine in a way, in that as years pass, you become more confident because you just have more time to run into situations that surprise you or confound you, and you feel those insecurities and go through the unconfidence in order to develop confidence and realize, like, by contrast, that you like who you are, and that there are moments when you don't, and that's okay, and it's human. It's what everybody's feeling. But I have gotten much more confident. Oh my God, my early 20s were were tougher. You know, I had a different journey than you, but I think something happens in your late 20s where you begin to um, know yourself in a different way. I'm not sure exactly why, but throughout my 30s, that also happened. And I feel the most confident that I've felt. I still have moments of insecurity that go back to things that have always been there since I was very small. But I am much more confident in myself than I've ever been, far more than I was when I was in my 20s. So I feel like good things keep happening if you remain vulnerable and open to the fact that you're going to be knocked down sometimes and not feel confident, but that contrast is what allows you to feel confidence later. Um, and you just stay curious to what's happening in the world and what's happening inside you, and are always thinking about that interaction. Um, so one other thing I want to ask as we get towards the end of the dialogue here, which I haven't worked out yet, but I just want to put out there as a question, is I think a lot of people run into situations where someone else beats them out, you know, like, and we all know that there's scales of like objective ability or natural characteristics or something like that. You know, like there's people that are just born more smart or more attractive or more, wealthy or whatever it is. And no one's ever going to be at the top of all the scales or even one of the scales. So in a world where people objectively have more than you do at times, how do you stop yourself from noticing that and just feeling really bad about yourself in the moment where just others seem to be thriving, or having an easier time than you? Just curious if you have any thoughts on that, because that can really knock down your confidence.
Yeah, I definitely, I think I think we can all say we've been at one point in our lives in those places where someone, is getting the promotion that you thought you would get, or, is a little prettier than you, or is better getting pretty grades than you. Anything that's just like on more above what you see yourself as. And I think, the way to go about those situations, in my experiences and just in my personal opinion, is accepting just that, like what you just said, that some people are just gonna be better at it for whatever reasons. Maybe they grew up and had more resources than you to do that, right? Maybe they're just like naturally have the ability to perform better in that area. But it is very rare, one, to see anyone who can check all the boxes and just be the perfect person. That is like, I don't think that person ever exists.
Hmm.
Um, and if they do, let me meet them and like get some of it, because they're not human.
All right.
But I think, yeah, it's just having, that place in your head that's saying like, wow, this person, is doing their thing and very good at it, but maybe it's just not my thing to be that good at, and that's okay. Like, you don't need to be perfect in everything in this world. And if someone beats you out in this one thing, maybe you beat them out in another, and maybe you don't. Like, right, life is not a huge competition all the time, but it's just then, okay, what actually am I still good at, right? And maybe it actually might be the same thing too, right? Maybe they are maybe they're first place, right? But you can be second, and it's okay to be second sometimes, right? It's still your success, wherever level you are, is still success.
Hmm.
And you don't need to always try to be the one at the top, because it's okay to not always be at the top. And then your day will come to fill that role when life is saying it is ready to do that.
Hmm.
And it's, I think, just, you have to just sit back and take a pause to get out of the space of competition. And I am super competitive, but take a breath and take some space from the competitiveness that surrounds us and really just be like, what are my things? What am I number one at? And if I'm number two, that's good too. And just take your success for in any aspect, right? And your good qualities for what they are. Because they are good and you are good for you. And that's where it starts.
Yeah, I'm thinking through this as you're talking. I like what you're saying. I mean, I think the mistake that people are making mentally when they see someone else who exceeds what they're doing, and they start to feel bad about themselves, is first seeing success as this linear thing in this one area that the person is succeeding at, rather than the fact that success is completely contextual, cultural, personal. And it's like, for some people, being successful means being able to memorize more of the Bible. For some people, that's it. For other people, it's like having the most money, being the best looking, or just, being someone that people think is a good person. I mean, all of these are measures of success that people have,
Right.
but combinations of them get very, very personal. So it's not this like straight line of success. It's this really like rocky, nuanced, personalized shape. And I think keeping that in mind can be good. And it's, again, like we said before, it's okay if you come in second place or fifth place or whatever it is, and you feel bad about it because you wanted to succeed. But what I've come to see as a person that is competitive as well, and like you grew up needing to achieve, and for me, I would feel very jealous of others, where I try to put them down immediately if they were better than me at something, is what I've come to now in my life is it's a little hopeful and kind of inspiring to know that someone can be better than me at something, and it's human. Then it just gets me like,
Yeah.
hey, like everybody else, I'm not as good as someone else sometimes, and that's kind of joins me to the other people in the world in this way, and maybe that person will go and do something really good with how talented they are. So these are things that took me a while to be able to feel, and I may not feel them reflexively, but I do get to them, and it's nice to have arrived there after the majority of my life just getting so competitive and feeling down if somebody had an objective advantage over me.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like one thing also, like I'm a dancer and that my journey with dance, I've been dancing for years and it's always been something that I love to do and is rooted in just the pure joy that I get when I dance and
Mm.
connect to music. But then there's another part of it where there is the industry side of it and there is a competitiveness to it. And so when I would see, these top dancers or just like other students who were just killing it a little more than I was killing it, it was part of it was like, dang, like they're so much better. Like, is this like, am I actually good at dancing? And then the other part of it was like you said, like it can actually serve as an inspiration if you let it. Like, what about these other people in my experience, dance abilities got them how good they are, right? And so I was like, actually, I want to emulate that, right? Let it inspire me to push me to keep training, like keep just getting better for myself. And then one day I can match match like where they're at and or just be better for me. Like
Mhm.
let me get to a higher position just for myself, not so I can, take their spot or be at their level, but just be at a better level than I want for where I am. And that's just growth, let these people who you think are like trumping you at whatever skill or personality may be too, like what do they have that you cannot necessarily try to take away from them but actually learn from and grow with. And I think that can actually be a very inspiring person and just use be able to instead of having their presence and their skill and everything, right, put you down and like have you question yourself, flip it and let it grow you. And that is also a very vulnerable position too. Like these are all very vulnerable processes to put yourself into, but they will ultimately, I think, if you allow yourself to be in those positions, benefit you to be your highest self.
Yeah. Well, to repeat, I mean, one of the things I've learned from this dialogue is that vulnerability is necessary for confidence and a little bit of ability to have friction with people and rebel a bit. These are two things that you absolutely must have. So it completely makes sense. And I like you talking about your experience with dance, because that's something that's so easy for people to understand, that you can feel a lot of personal joy in it. And yet dance is one of the most competitive worlds, depending on the type of dance, but I bet all of them can be super competitive. Um, so to me, it just really speaks to the fact that there is probably something that you are particularly good at, whatever it is in your field, your world, that of what you choose to do in your life, the many things you do in both work and personal and hobbies. But there's room for thousands and thousands of little niches within each thing. Like someone can be like the fastest coder or the best singer. Someone is Whitney Houston. Someone was Whitney Houston, right? And I bet a lot of people were like, I can never have that voice. But if we think about all the singers we love, not all of them need to have the powerful voice of Whitney. Some of them we love because of the different quality of their voice, their lyrics. It brings something else to the conversation. There's so many niches within any field. So,
Exactly. And also just one thing to add to that too is like in my experience with dance specifically, it was also really, even when I, was either insecure from another dancer or just like in complete awe from another dancer.
mhm,
I when I talked to them and actually became friends with them or whatever, it was like I got to see like they're also in a very similar place than you, right? And to you, and like you might have them on this pedestal, but then like you talk to them and they're like, "Oh my god, wow, but I saw you dance and the way you move your hips, like I wish I could do that." And you're like,
mm,
"Wait a second. You're talking about me? Like you actually want to learn something from me." And it's like you can be your own worst critic at times,
mhm,
and especially when you're seeing someone else do something that you want to do better than you, or you think they're doing it better than you. But when you are able to, either through like talking to them or any interaction or even just with yourself, be like, hey, they're actually very human too, and probably going through similar things, and also like are able to see the good things of your craft and what you're doing, or just like who you are as a person, right? Sometimes people are like, oh, like she's such a nice person or whatever, great friend, and then you talk to them and you're like, oh my god, but the way you are, I don't know, so funny, right? I wish I could be that funny. And like you see that everyone has something to bring to the table, even when you don't think you do. So just remember that little aspect. Like you might have this person on this pedestal and they might seem the greatest, but they're, if anything, just like you as well.
mhm.
And you have pieces of yourself too that they might not. And they love that about you too.